Mr. Sun.
Please call me Andrew. That's how they call my father.
Andrew.
Yes.
It took us a long time to know each other.
Yes.
And even until this moment, I'm so, let me put it this way, I'm proud to get to know you. Okay? But I'm sure the audience the audience want to know you too. So could you kindly just let us know who you are and just give us a little briefing.
I am 38. I'm a Hong Kong Chinese.
Single? Are you single?
I am, as of currently, I am single, not married yet. Born and bred in Hong Kong, raised in Hong Kong until the age of 19. And then I went to the United States for my tertiary education, where I got my bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan. And then I returned to Hong Kong and has worked as first as an equity analyst, and then now as
so
a
you follow the money, huh?
Yes, I do follow the money. I am now a financial and political commentator. So that is actually my job. So that's my background.
Well, but that doesn't satisfy my curiosity. Judging from what I've learned from your previous videos and history, I understand you are philosophically sound. Is that part of your hobby? You love. It seems to me you have read far more than just follow the money thing.
I would say I'm blessed with a lot of thinking peers. I co-founded a public policy think tank called the Lion Rock Institute roughly 11 years ago.
I see.
And through that particular organization, I got to enjoy a lot of banter and discussion with my friends. In fact, I'm probably the one who is the least capable of thinking. So they are far superior in their thought process. But Doctor, I am quite honored.
Call me Bob.
Dr. Bob, I'm quite honored that you think that I'm philosophically sound.
As actually, I'm just making a statement of fact. This is not placebo. This is reality.
Yes.
What I've seen in Andrew and you is something that amazes me. You know, your thinking pattern. But I could not help myself but to think a little harder. That I think there's a core of you, and this core, which is very, very unique. Okay, unique because I grew up mostly in the United States. Okay, for decades and decades I've been there. So I kind of know how you think, but I kind of don't know how you think, because my core of Hong Kong is far lesser in its degree than you are. So starting from this point, okay, I know there have been considerable deep level thinking that are tectonic in this in your shift of what you wanted to do, what you have been doing. Now, in order to drive at this core, let's get back to what Hong Kong is. A lot of if you go outside to West Virginia, for example, okay, they may know Bruce Lee.
Yes.
Okay, but they may not know Hong Kong.
Yes.
So let's date back ourselves to 1200 years ago in Song Dynasty, all right? And right here in the local, this little fishing village, okay, I want you to give us a briefing. I'm not sure you're familiar with that part of the history of Hong Kong. 1200 years ago.
I'm actually not quite familiar. All I know is that one of the emperors had to come here, and they left a piece of stone.
In that case, let's put it this way. Hong Kong in 1200 years ago is far more than a fishing village as people post it to be, which is ridiculous. Hong Kong is actually a transit point between here and this connection to other ocean countries.
Well, if you start off with the geopolitics of Hong Kong, a lot of Hong Kong quote unquote experts and intellectuals in academics, they usually leave out the geography in geopolitics. which is quite unfortunate. But Hong Kong is situated at the Pearl River mouth. The Pearl River is one of the three major rivers in China, and in economics, if you look at the British currency, the one they use in England, on the £20 note they commemorate Adam Smith. And Adam Smith's, of course, amazing discovery, or at least observation, is through the division of labor, through specialization, people's productivity increases and therefore creates surpluses, and through trading raises everyone's living standards. But of course, in the process of specialization and creating that specific product or service that you're good at, you would accumulate so much that you have to transport it. And even from the times of the pyramids to today, even till today, water transport, particularly river transport, has always been the cheapest per tonnage per kilometer, okay, per distance traveled. And therefore, when transportation cost is that low, people all along the river can engage in specialization and therefore be increasingly productive, create the surpluses, and therefore create capital, and therefore further enhance their ability to produce, and therefore further enhance their living standards. And traditionally, the capital would usually accumulate at the mouth of the river. And that gave rise, especially in the age after the Industrial Revolution, gives rise to a lot of global financial centers. New York being one of the examples. I think it's Hamburg being another example. Hong Kong, obviously. Shanghai being another example. So anywhere where there is water transportation, because of transportation cost, it would give a natural advantage for that place to accumulate capital. And once you start accumulating capital, you will start accumulating human beings who are smart enough to manage that capital and invest the capital. So that is how the rise of Hong Kong is. But of course, you can talk about the 1200 years ago during the Song Dynasty.
Yeah.
But I would fast forward a little bit to the Qing Dynasty.
Okay.
And especially the Ming Dynasty. Because in the Ming and Qing Dynasty, we're talking about the age of Marco Polo, when Venice was at its apex in the Western world.
Right.
The Ming Dynasty was very fearful of pirates and of foreign influence, and therefore actually ordered, those two dynasties ordered people living on the coastal areas to retreat from the coastal areas, to depopulate the coastal areas.
Yeah, but I remember that time, one of the big problems was the Japanese, actually.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, you're talking about pirates. This is pirates with a national flag.
Yeah, how times have... Well, I'm not going to comment on Japanese on this one. But all I can say that it became national policy, and Hong Kong was...
No pun intended.
Hong Kong was depopulated as a coastal area, you know. And if you talk about the coastal area, Hong Kong was depopulated. So if you were to talk about today's Hong Kong, I would actually start off with when the rise of the British Empire.
That's what I meant to ask you. Given this Delta culture, its proximity to a vast array of shipping lines.
Yes.
Okay. So, would you say Hong Kong, regardless of who the government will be, eventually will evolve into a very major city?
It would have a natural tendency to accumulate capital if the hinterland, the watershed area of the Pearl River Delta, or even beyond, remains productive. But of course, as I think the 20th century has proven that public policy, especially the wrong type of public policy, can be highly destructive to capital accumulation. I mean, Shanghai was basically in a time capsule from 1949 onwards, and so probably the early 1990s, right? So, you know, just because geography gives you the advantage doesn't mean that the politics would be there to help you. And therefore, if you were to compare and contrast, because where Shanghai is at the mouth of the Yangtze River, Yangtze River with its length, with its depth, is actually a naturally more competitive port city than Hong Kong.
Whampoa, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
That much I agree.
You know, so if they are far more advantageous geographically, they should be a far superior port.
But clearly they're not, at least for a long time.
Not yet. Well, at least for a long time, yes. Because the politics came to play. Hong Kong became this miracle. Partly because it truly was a accident of history. If we didn't, I mean, I'm one of my personal idol is a historian, a Harvard Cambridge historian by the name of Neil Ferguson. It's spelled Niall because he's Scottish, but it's pronounced Neil Ferguson. And
Niall.
Niall, yes,
Oh, okay.
Neil Ferguson.
Yeah.
And this Ferguson has talked about the changes of, why the Western world basically rose. Why was it able to rise? And he talked about 6 apps. If you can read his book, but of course you can always just watch his TED talk. In fact, you can search now his TED talk about the rise of the Western world, about 6 apps that you can download. It includes things like mass consumerism, protect property rights, all that kind of stuff. And Hong Kong, compared to Shanghai, was able to download these 6 apps because by accident we became part of the British Empire during the Victorian era.
I gotta inject something here for the listeners who are not familiar with the history of Hong Kong.
Oh, yes.
Okay, sometimes in our geopolitical or just history, okay, one warfare, one incident can change the fate of a place.
Yes.
May it be in the United States or in England.
Yes.
Okay, so could you bring us up to date as to what do you mean by accident?
Well, this is according to The Economist, so I guess it has some credibility amongst the intelligentsia audience out there. But according to The Economist, probably after the fall of the Roman Empire, even with the Eastern Roman Empire, once the Western Roman Empire fell, China had the highest GDP in the world. It has the highest GDP per capita in the world, at least until the rise of the Portuguese and Spanish in the age of discovery of the 16th century and 17th century. But if you talk about GDP size, it was well into the Qing dynasty, early 19th century that China still had the biggest GDP. The Indians out there, the Indian audience out there might disagree, which I think is well founded. But I would say that China is right up there as the biggest economies in the world, and one of the rising nations with the most advanced technology, Britain, wanted to trade and make some money out in China. I mean, they had a lot of enterprising entrepreneurs, and China, of course, closed its ports to official policy to close its ports, and didn't want to trade with Britain. So there are these enterprising Scottish, really, traders who discovered that there is a product which the Chinese would buy in insatiable quantities. To be honest, if you find anything the Chinese would buy, it will be in insatiable quantities. Right? So that's what they discovered was opium. Opium, of course, it's a derivative from poppy, which could then be further nowadays be made into things like morphine, codeine, and heroin. Highly addictive, but of course it's a drug. And basically, the Scots in Hong Kong, they were mostly Scots, they were basically drug barons, and they ran a lot of opium into China, and it caused a widespread leakage. I mean, of course there were social problems, but one of the biggest problems was that China leaked out a lot of national wealth through this trade, and so there was this government official.
You're talking about Qing Dynasty.
Qing Dynasty, late 1830s.
Right.
Late 1830s. And this particular official called Lam Zhachai in Cantonese burnt their goods, just incinerated the opium stockpile, and of course that really angered the Scottish traders and the telegraph. I guess telegraph wasn't actually connected to Hong Kong back then, but they wrote a piece of letter and requested help, and the British Empire sent a gunboat and defeated the Chinese and embargoed the Grand Canal. And by blocking the Grand Canal, because China by then, of course, being the biggest GDP, had a very sophisticated, highly specialized economy, therefore having any internal disruptions would have
literally choking China.
Yes, it would actually, well, not choke, but starve.
Yeah.
So the Qing courts surrendered and they signed a peace treaty, what the British would call the Treaty of Nanking, and what the modern day communists in China caused the first in a whole series of unequal treaties. And in that treaty, of course, the first term was to open up China for trading, limited opening, but it was an opening up. There was reparations. It was very fashionable to have reparations. Millions and millions of taels. A tael of silver. A tael is a unit of weight. A tael of silver is about 1 point something troy ounces. So we're talking about 30 million troy ounces of silver we paid to the British government to pay for the expedition. London actually sent direct instructions to the person in charge, which there was two, most famous one, Charles Elliot, and one Henry Pottinger, and they were instructed to not take any land as colonies. They were instructed to do so because London basically lacked the resources. They lacked the personnel. They just thought that it was just too far away, surrounded by too many hostile powers. Therefore, it would be a pain to defend. So that was the instructions. But unfortunately, according to legend, by the time that the letter arrived to the negotiators, the Treaty of Nanking was signed, and in that they took Hong Kong.
So by that you mean Hong Kong was taken by accident?
Yes, well, at least that's the urban legend. I mean, of course, historians nowadays said that the London gave them free hand to take whatever they wanted to. And Charles Elliot became very conservative and took a very small island called the Hong Kong Island that was facing a very nice...
There's a whole series of unfair treaties, actually. Without going into details, let's get back to the geopolitical thing and the development of Hong Kong.
Well, basically Hong Kong became a British colony because the British expansion, imperialistic ambition. I think it was a comedian, Trevor Noah, that says that imperialism is basically nationalism on steroids. Not only are you proud of who you are so proud of what you have that you want others be imposed upon others, right? That's colonialism in its essence. And that is what the British did to Hong Kong. And it was because of this momentary insanity in this explosion of empire that they took Hong Kong. And Hong Kong, through further series of treaties, and was enlarged. But even at its biggest, which is its current size, it is still a tiny, tiny place.
Yeah,
tiny place. But there are a few policies that were put in place because both Charles Elliot and Henry Pottinger, especially Henry Pottinger, which Charles Elliot I suspect was fired. Henry Pottinger was put in place, and Henry Pottinger, being our first governor of Hong Kong, knew that he was knee-deep in empire politics. Because if the birth of your place is accompanied by your home country explicitly telling you that there will be no headcount nor budget to run your place, and yet you are, remember this was the 1840s here, right? You had no Suez Canal. People from England had to travel round the Cape of Good Hope into the Indian Ocean, right across the Indian Ocean, down the Malacca Straits, up the South China Sea before they get to Hong Kong. So there will be no personnel, no headcount. You are on your own. And you are surrounded by hostile and foreign powers. You know, you invaded China, you blockaded their capital. You are facing a very hostile. How are you going to defend this place? How are you going to maintain simple political control? Alright? So, they put in three particular, Henry Pottinger set out 3 rules in which to guarantee to play this empire game to solidify its control. Rule number 1, Hong Kong has to remain tax-free. Government will have revenue.
No, tax-free.
As in like direct taxes.
Yeah.
Okay, direct taxes, no. No income tax, no profit tax, no custom duties, I think even.
No income tax.
No profit tax.
No property tax.
No profit tax. Property tax, yes. Right?
Okay.
Majority of the government's income is going to be coming from land sales, land leases. All the land in Hong Kong, Part1, is owned by the government. This is a lesson learned because British Empire, people say that the Americans' 50 states, 50, right?
Right.
Is the greatest laboratory for public policy, whereby if it works in one state, it'll be copied in another state, right? No. In history, the greatest laboratory for public policy is the British Empire. In every single colony, where one colony learns a lesson, it will be applied to other colonies. Okay? And the lesson that the British learned in the American colonies that they lost is that government has to have revenue. and it would be stupid for them to give land out to the people. Instead, land should be owned by the government and leased to the people, so that through the leasing process, the government will have a stable income, and therefore don't have to tax the tea leaves, which led to the American Revolution, according to American textbooks anyway, right? Boston Tea Party. So that was the majority of the tax coming in, and also, of course, the annual police rates, government rates, in which they levy, government rent, in which they levy on these land. Then, of course, there's the licenses. If you want to run a business, you have to pay for a license. That's the first rule. No direct taxes. The second rule is that Hong Kong government, even though they are run by the British, will respect local customs, i.e. Chinese people's customs.
Now this, could you give us, just on the side, what do you mean by Chinese custom?
Well, back then, for example, I mean, if you think female mutilation of clipping the clitoris is a bad idea, Chinese people used to completely mutilate young little girls' feet by binding them, by actually literally breaking their feet into half. Like, imagine my palm, breaking it in half and then folding it inwards. Okay? It's called foot binding. That was allowed under the Henry Pottinger. Eating dogs, for example, was a very Chinese thing.
Polygamy was allowed?
Polygamy was still allowed. Yeah, these things, basically, the British, you know, basically said, you know, you guys can continue to do whatever Chinese people do.
Right.
Right. And the third one is that Hong Kong has to be a free port of trade, including the enemies of the British Empire can trade freely in Hong Kong, buying and selling, whatever they wished. These three rules, from the perspective of the 21st century, seems extremely enlightened. Right? The first rule of no direct taxes, woohoo, no coercive force on the government, on the people's wallets. Great. The second rule, respecting local customs, I believe in 21st century language, will be called multiculturalism.
Well, whatever you call it. It's politics.
Hey, I went to an American university, so it's called multiculturalism, right? Diversity. The third rule, which is free port trading, right? Well, trading, free trade, great, you know, GATT and WTO and all that, you know. You would think all these enlightened coming from the British, you would think, oh, this Harry Pottinger guy must be, must be one of those Wilberforce people, you know, those people in London that was against slavery, for example. Right? Very enlightened. Wrong. He was a hard-nosed politician. He had no problems sailing a gunboat up China and firing at all these, you know, yellow-skinned, black-haired individuals, right? That was running around like barbarians in his eyes. Right? He was a British colonialist. The reason why he implemented these three, take the first one. Direct taxes is extremely labor-intensive policy. If you don't have the tax collectors and someone decides to cheat on their taxes, you would basically, the entire system would collapse. So, land sales, on the other hand, you just need to hold an auction, right? Which is with part-time auctioneers at a table and a map in which you circle, revenue will start coming in. And once you can identify who the owner of the property is, you can then levy an annual tax on them. Simple. Business license is the same thing. Highly detectable, easy to tax.
Right.
So it is out of a lack of headcount that they went with the no-direct tax
I think
rules.
the audience in the United States will appreciate this very much in terms of the size and organization of Internal Revenue Service.
Right.
Versus what it was in Hong Kong. Oh, it needs just a clerk in a small office to handle the whole place.
I'll give you numbers to compare. I mean, Hong Kong started out really truly with nothing, not a lot of people, because the Ming and Qing dynasty depopulated Hong Kong. But by the 1950, 10 years after Hong Kong Island was ceded to the British, Hong Kong's population swelled to 100,000. Of 100,000 people, less than 1,000 was white people. We're talking about less than 1% of the population governing the remaining 99.
Right.
Okay? That was how efficient it was, head count-wise. And rule number one helped that. You know, rule number one helped by reducing the head count in the government bureaucracy, because Henry Pottinger knew that London won't be sending anyone to them, and he would have a hard time recruiting. In fact, Hong Kong was so far away and so foreign and so surrounded by hostile powers, Victorian-era parents would scare their children if they were not behaving. that if they kept on misbehaving, that they would be sent to Hong Kong as punishment. I mean, Hong Kong was even worse than Australia, and Australia is a convict colony. Anyways, rule number 2, multiculturalism. It's not because of multiculturalism that they allowed the Chinese people to break little girls' feet and continue to eat dogs and practice polygamy. But if everything that the Chinese was doing was legal, they don't even need policemen, right?
Right.
In fact, in any cultures, behavior modification takes effective policing and punishment. Effective policing and punishment takes a lot of headcounts. Policemen, judges, correctional officers, prison, you name it. They just didn't have a budget nor the headcount. Right. So whatever you guys were doing, go ahead, do it. I mean, were the British still very strong in their Victorian values of property protection? Yes. Private property reigned supreme. Okay? But apart from that, if you didn't violate someone else's property, you were allowed to do whatever you want. High degrees of social freedom. Okay? And the third rule, this one being absolutely genius, typical of empire politics. Hong Kong being a free port of trade, including even the British enemies of the British Empire. Imagine, when your fleet has to sail thousands of miles, we're talking about it's equivalent of sailing your fleet from St. Petersburg to Vladivostok.
Right on.
Right? You know what happened to the Russians, right? So, when your fleet is that far away, there is no effective defense you can put in Hong Kong. And if you were sitting down, how do you reduce the incentive of the enemies to attack you? Right? Of this small port with no natural resources. So, first of all, of course, there's a natural deterrent of attacking anywhere that's a British Empire. Right? Even if the British can't really defend Hong Kong.
Well, those were the days when the British, their flag never sank.
Their
sees
flags,
no suns.
Yes! The flags that never... the sun that never sets on the empire.
Right.
They had the ability to eradicate your capital. Basically, whatever nation you picked on any land that was of the British Empire, they would come kick your butt, right? To using American terminology. But to reduce further the incentive for people to attack, war always incurred a cost. Right? War, whatever scale, always incur a cost. And therefore, if you had some strategic thing that you wanted, why not, instead of fighting and incurring a cost there, why not just use the resources and buy it in Hong Kong? That is how the Hong Kong tradition came by of laissez-faire economics. Okay?
This is actually a classroom example of laissez-faire economy.
Right.
Yeah.
People say that, oh, Hong Kong is a port of commerce, that's why they want to encourage free trading. Yes, to a certain extent. I'm sure the financial backers, those Scottish drug barons that were running opium into China, wanted that because of that reason. It's a commercial reason. But Henry Pottinger is a hard-nosed colonialist, right? He's an imperialist. He approved this policy, or at least maybe he even thought of this policy, because he knew that if Hong Kong was a free port, you would suddenly turn Hong Kong, instead of being a hostile eyesore for the surrounding powers, into one that would be useful to the surrounding powers, aligning their interest with us. Therefore, not only would they not be hostile, they would actually actively protect us. Ingenious. And that is one of the reasons why I think there is no one left in the world.
Did he came up with this idea, or is this...
I am pretty sure that someone in the British Empire, through painful lessons, learned this lesson, wrote it in a file somewhere, filed it in London, and then when he had to come up with policies in order to dissuade other people from attacking, he can access this library of knowledge. And that is why the British Empire is probably the greatest laboratory of public policy ever in the history of mankind. Alright?
Amazing.
Amazing. It is ingenious.
It is amazing. Turning into a fishing village, into a free port.
Right.
Where you can, you're talking about anything.
Anything you can trade in Hong Kong.
Including all military craft.
Hey! I'll get back to that. There are laws against military ammunition trading in Hong Kong. I'll get back to that one. But the most important thing is that if you're a Jamaican, if you're a South African, if you're an Egyptian, if you are an Iraqi, if you are an American, a Canadian, an Australian, a Hong Kong Chinese, a Malaysian, right? We share the same British imperial heritage.
Right.
The common law system still runs through most of us, for example.
I need to ask you again. What do you mean? Why you keep saying that that's luck? That because of this three policies, it's not luck.
No, luck. These three policies are obviously not luck. These three policies were clearly thought out by Henry Pottinger and implemented.
Right.
But Henry Pottinger didn't have to take Hong Kong. He could have say gone to Shenzhen.
Right.
Zhongshan.
Right.
Right. He could have gone anywhere along the river estuary. Right. Why Hong Kong?